If I could have everyone's attention, please, and ask that we take our seats and settle down. We're about ready to begin with our Finance Committee first today. Just a reminder that we audio and video record our meetings. So for the board, I ask that you remember to push your button on your microphone when you have something to say on the record, and push it when you're finished. We have a limited number of active microphones, so if we can work together on that, it'd be great. So with that, I will turn it over to Chairman McGallis.
Thank you, Audrey. I call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson? Director Buchanan?
Here.
Director Colson? Here. Director DeWitt? Here. Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Here.
Director Troiani?
Here.
Director McGallis?
Here.
We have a quorum of 7 present, 1 absent, with 2 of those present participating via telephone with the appropriate paperwork completed. If the record would also show that Directors Durante, Frega, Fuentes, Higgins, Ross, and Chairman Dillard are all also present.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes for the meeting held on October 20, 2016. Are there any questions or comments? And if not, could I have a motion and a second? Motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second. Second by Director DeWitt. Roll call.
Director Buchanan?
Aye.
Director Colson? Aye. Director DeWitt? Aye. Director Lewis?
Yeah, aye.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Aye.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
7 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 3A is a presentation of the quarterly performance report. Jill.
Good morning. Good morning, Director McGallis and members of the Finance Committee. I will be presenting performance results early in the morning through the third quarter of 2016. We provide this report on a quarterly basis at the same time that you are receiving quarterly budget results to certify the service boards are in substantial accordance with their budget. The performance comparisons in this report are to performance in the prior year, which would be through the third quarter of 2015. First, let's look at ridership performance. Using data from the National Transit Database, NTD, we can see ridership trends through the third quarter of the year over the past 15 years. We see a low point in 2003 to 2004 following a recessionary period in 2001 and in 2002. Ridership continued to rise through 2008 and then declined and flattened during the financial crisis and recession. Ridership through the third quarter peaked in 2012 when it totaled 494 million rides. 2012 marked the highest annual ridership since 1990. 2012 ridership is followed by 4 years of declining ridership in 2013 through 16. The 2013 decline was occurring primarily on CTA following the elimination of 13 bus routes in December of 2012 and a January 2013 fare increase. 2014 was the winter of the polar vortex, followed by another severe winter in 2015, which led to lower ridership in those winter quarters. Through the third quarter of 2016, we see a ridership decrease of 2.7% compared to 2015. This chart shows RTA system ridership by mode through the third quarter of 2016, represented by the blue bars. The orange dot within each bar represents the peer average ridership performance for that mode. CTA bus ridership is down 5.1% compared to 2015, and rail ridership dropped 0.6%. Bus ridership was below peer performance, and rail ridership, although it declined, showed better performance in comparison to its peers. Metro ridership was up 0.3%, even following the implementation of a 2% fare increase on February 1st, and was close to the peer average ridership increase of 0.9%. Pace Bus showed a 4.9% ridership decrease through the third quarter of 2016. Even with the decrease, Pace ridership is performing slightly better than its peer average of negative 5.1%. Vanpool experienced steeper losses, ending the third quarter 10.2% below 2015, a much steeper decline compared to its peer average of negative 1.3%. At a summer Pace board meeting, there was discussion about ramping up efforts to promote Vanpool services through a new marketing initiative. ADA paratransit ridership increased by 1.3%, while its peers increased by 2%. Here is a look at the 2016 peer regional ridership through the third quarter compared to 2015. This chart shows year-over-year regional ridership using the same peer metropolitan areas that we use in our annual peer review. The Chicago region is in the middle of the pack with a 2.7% ridership decrease. On this chart, we are looking at a few of the service and financial measures. 2016 performance still has some favorable performance shown by green arrows. We see 3 of them here, along with 3 red arrows showing unfavorable performance. There was some increases in service as measured by vehicle revenue hours and vehicle revenue miles, the first 2 green arrows. Regional operating costs, after being adjusted for inflation, were up 1.1%. Operating cost per vehicle revenue hour was somewhat offset by the increase in vehicle revenue hours, yet increased 0.4% or 67 cents. The operating cost per passenger trip was $4.24, 3.9% unfavorable compared to 2015. This results from the combination of 2 unfavorable inputs, higher operating costs and lower ridership. The fare revenue per passenger trip increased by 4 cents to $1.60, a favorable change of 2.5%. This is mostly due to the Metro fare increase. The fare recovery ratio, as shown here, reflects the ratio of fare revenue to operating expense without any credits or exclusions. Performance through the third quarter of 2016 had a recovery ratio of 37.6%, slightly lower compared to 2015. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Director Lewis.
Bill, could you go back to the slide? Oh, sorry. Could you go back to the slide before where it showed the comparison? I was in Philadelphia this past weekend, and they just recently implemented a procedure where riders over 65 could ride free of charge on public transportation. My question is, have we studied that to see if there's any positive correlation between perhaps a ridership, because I know in particular the CTA ridership numbers are down. Is there any available information to let us know whether that is a successful tactic? And I know we tried it here in Illinois before under Governor Blagojevich, but just wondered if there's any new information that we might look at to let us know if something like that might increase ridership.
That's a good point. Do you know when Philadelphia implemented that? Was that recently or?
I was just there last weekend.
Yeah,
All I
yeah.
know is I rode the bus for free.
Right.
We can go back and pull together the numbers for the, exactly what happened in Illinois in 2008. One of the things that I think we have to be mindful of is even though our ridership is down, there's the other side to that equation. So ridership also typically brings some revenue in the door, and ridership with an additional cost of no revenue can actually be a bigger burden for us. So we want to be mindful of that. But we can pull together the numbers on what actually happened in 2008. I can tell you, just without giving actual specific numbers, I do know that when it was rolled back to being a means-tested program here in Illinois, we didn't see a drop in ridership. So we actually, and from what I recall, we didn't see a significant increase when the legislation passed. It was essentially people just taking advantage of being able to ride free and really just capturing people who were still, or keeping people who were still already riding. There was sort of a bit of a running joke. You had the law partners on Metra who now were choosing to ride for free on the system. So we were carrying riders, but not necessarily realizing some of the revenues. But we can pull together some of that. I do think there's some examples in some small pockets. Sometimes cities have considered something like this in a circulated kind of mode in an urban, in sort of downtown areas and things like that. But we can pull together some information and share that with you.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me was that I think it only applied to like the buses. So, for example, in our community, it wouldn't necessarily apply to Metro, but it might apply to CTA, which might give some additional incentives there. So I just thought if Philadelphia had some information, we might look at it, but that's an opportunity. So thank you.
Yep.
Oh, the loss in revenue, though, that we had when they passed that ranged anywhere from estimates of 30 million to 90 million.
Over 100,
Yeah,
actually.
so
at one
it
point,
was all over the place, but it had a definite impact on our budget. I know that because we felt that loss tremendously in all the agencies. Yeah, it was a lot of money. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, we'll go on to item number 4, which is a resolution certifying the financial results for the third quarter 2016. B.
Good morning, Director, and members. We're going to review the financial results for the third quarter of 2016, and they're subject to board certification. Let's just bring it up first. You also received a comprehensive report with the financial and performance results. That was part of what Jill was covering, and then another part of that is the financial piece. There we go. The Service Board's year-to-date financial results for the third quarter were satisfactory. Operating revenue has been negatively impacted by unfavorable ridership, but strong expense performance, led by low fuel costs, has driven favorable to budget operating deficits for each of the service boards. At the end of the presentation, I'll be recommending that the board certify the results of operations of each service board and the region as a whole, that they are in substantial accordance with the adopted 2016 budget. During the third quarter, Chicago area Chicago area employment decreased by about 8,000 jobs, and the workforce shrank by nearly 22,000. As a result, the regional unemployment rate was improved by 0.7 percentage points to 5.3%. However, this still lags the national rate at 5%. Year-to-date, system ridership was 3.6% lower than budget through the third quarter, as shown by the orange bars on the chart. System ridership continues to show a consistent decline compared to 2015. As we saw in the quarterly performance report presentation, Chicago ridership performance ranked 5 out of the 10 major transit agencies. Factors impacting ridership, of course, include the low gas prices, competition from ride sharing. We should be able to report some better news on ridership starting next month, given the events on the north side. Returning to ridership summary, but remember, that was a joke. Remember,
I have to just jump in there. She can't even say what happened.
We're Sox
She's such a
fans.
Sox fan.
So, but remember, you won't see that for a couple of months. The year-to-date ridership, here, let's go into the summary. So CTA year-to-date ridership was 3.9% under budget, highlighted in red, and 3% lower than in 2015. Bus ridership has decreased by 5.1% this year, and even rail ridership is down slightly by 0.6%. Metro ridership was 1.4% unfavorable to budget, as customers continue to respond to the 2015 and 2016 fare increases, also the lower gas prices. Let's look at Pace Suburban ridership, highlighted in red, finished the quarter 3.9% unfavorable to budget and 5.1% lower than 2015. Regional ADA paratransit ridership was essentially flat versus prior year, which is still 4.7% unfavorable to Pace's budgeted growth of 5%. Let's look at operating revenue, and this was $7.2 million or 0.8% unfavorable to budget due to unfavorable ridership and the 48% lower level of state reduced fare reimbursement. And that was provided under the state stopgap budget bill. Pace Suburban Service operating revenue was $3.6 million or 7.9% unfavorable to budget, highlighted in red, and again due to shortfalls in fare revenue, the reduced state fare reimbursement funding, and other income. ADA paratransit operating revenue was $1.4 million or 12.4% unfavorable, also highlighted in red due to shortfalls again in fare revenue, Medicaid reimbursements, which are really timing differences, but we're just not getting them at all right now, and reimbursements to the for RTA certification trips. The public funding section of the dashboard shows favorable to budget results due to the strong RET or real estate transfer tax performance. But sales tax growth has been lethargic in recent months. Of the 12-month sales tax results, none have exceeded 4% growth, and 3 months have declined from prior year. Year-to-date growth through August is now about 1.5%, following a growth of 4% in 2015. The reasons for the slowdown are not clear. We'll continue to monitor the situation, but I do want to share with you that the latest Moody forecast, which we just received, lowered 2016 growth from 3.3% to 2%, but did affirm that the growth of in 2017 would be 4%, and they're expecting that to be due to inflation. So it's good that for 2017 they were still projecting a 4% growth. So we'll continue to watch that. On a brighter note, system-wide operating expenses through September were $50.3 million, or 2.5 favorable to budget, with each service board reporting favorable results for year-to-date. Let's take a look at the fuel slide, which shows savings relative to budget, and they continue to be realized by each service board, particularly at PACE, which uses a flow-to-market purchasing strategy. For the system overall, fuel savings total $18.4 million, or more than 1/3 of the total favorable expense variance. Metro had a 3.2 favorable to budget expense, highlighted in the light blue, driven primarily by fuel and maintenance savings of $8.4 million and $2.9 million respectively. I want to remind the board, especially for some of the new members, that what we do is when items are red, it's a variance of higher than 3%, negative variance. And so other than that, it's you see the light blue or you see blue. Then when we look at PACE Suburban Service, they had a 6.2 favorable to budget expense performance. PACE 88 Paratransit, 9.4% favorable expense performance, which was driven by lower purchase transportation, fuel, and administrative expenses. So now let's look at the regional results. So favorable operating expenses and public funding more than offset the unfavorable operating revenue. So it's producing a year-to-date net result, which is $61.3 million favorable to budget, a $14.4 million improvement from the second quarter results. Metro, PACE, and ADA all had favorable net results variances in excess of 3%, highlighted in the light blue, due to good expense performance, and also in the case of Metro, favorable operating revenue. The regional system-generated revenue recovery ratio of 51.4 was 1.1 percentage points favorable to budget through the third quarter. Metro's recovery ratio was favorable to budget, while CTA, PACE, and ADA Paratransit were each slightly unfavorable. On the left, as you can see, the fair revenue recovery ratio of 37.6, which is what was reported earlier in the performance, is what we would call the pure recovery ratio, only passenger fare revenue, and it improved by 0.7 percentage points from the second quarter. When you add in the ancillary service board revenue, the recovery ratio increases to 44% through September, and that's all revenue, and it also improved by 1.1 percentage points. Focusing on the certification of year-to-date financial results through the third quarter, this slide displays the variances of each of the service boards' operating deficit from budget. The operating deficit is calculated by subtracting the operating expenses from the operating revenue and does not include public funding results. Each service board had a favorable variance in operating deficit. Metro, PACE, and ADA Paratransit's favorable variance exceeded 3%. So the combined regional operating deficit was $43.1 million, or 3.8% favorable. I recommend the results of each of the operations of each service board and the region taken as a whole to be found in substantial accordance with the adopted budget year-to-date. And that concludes the results for the third quarter of 2016. You also have a handout that does the quarterly review and also reiterates some of the performance metrics that were presented earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea. Are there any questions or comments? Director Colson.
B, you explained once that the PACE recovery is always 30% and the PACE ADA recovery ratio is always 10% because they get that percentage and they stop calculating, something like that. Isn't that going to, maybe we should get the real numbers because it might be higher, and that's going to impact our system-wide recovery ratio, which is scraping the 50%.
We have talked to PACE about that. They only use the credits necessary. That's correct. There are other credits available, and we have talked about that to encourage them to use other credits. What I can say is that they were all willing to come up in 2017. Remember, we got like 0.3, 0.2, 0.5. So we think we're going to be okay, but you're right, that's the first place we would go.
Okay, thank you.
And we do have a settlement with PACE on that issue anyway, as far as their level of reimbursement.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments? If not, Could we have a motion to approve? Motion by Director Melvin, second by Director Lewis. Roll call.
Sorry, she may
No, we're missing the secretary. Yeah. And we thought technology runs a thing like this. It's the secretary. Okay, Madam Secretary, what we have now is a motion and a second. Motion by Director Melvin, second by Director Lewis to approve item 4, which is a resolution certifying the financial results for the third quarter 2016. And we've asked for a roll call.
Of course you did.
Thank you.
Director Buchanan?
Aye.
Director Colson? Director DeWitt? Yes. Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Aye.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
7 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 5A is a presentation of the 2017 RTA agency budget, and this is for review and comment and exchange of information with no action today, but it will be included with the other agency budgets in the future. I know there were a couple of additional things that people would like shown at that next meeting, and that would be the 2016 projected expense column to show that what it's projected at versus
Correct.
what it's budgeted at, and also the staffing head count for 16, proposed for 17. That also would be included in our
Right.
next presentation.
So we'll cover all of that. Just a little reminder of how this works. Today, Bill Lackman, our treasurer and director of budget and management, will be presenting the RTA agency budget. So it's our smaller budget, and provide details on that and so forth. On November 30th, you will then hear from each of the service boards, CTA, Metro, and PACE, a detailed presentation on their budget. And we do give them a template of certain topics to cover. Hopefully, we include everything. You'll have an opportunity to, answer, ask questions. And then at the December board meeting is when you'll vote on all of the regional budget, including the agency and the 3 service boards. So a lot of work has gone into this. Bill Legman is the budget manager, but he works with Nora and a team of staff to produce this. But I'll turn it over to Bill now so that he can present our agency budget.
Good morning. Again this year, the RTA followed a priority-based budgeting approach for the RTA agency budget. The budget was developed in keeping with the 5-year regional strategic plan adopted by the RTA board in August of 2013. This approach aligns the agency's budget with the RTA's mission within the RTA region. The proposed 2017 RTA agency budget totals $40.9 million. The proposed budget was developed in 2 parts: administration and regional programs. We divide the budget this way to ensure that we meet the requirement in the RTA Act that places a cap on the agency's administrative expenses. The administrative budget includes expenses for staff, facilities, information technology, and professional services that support the funding, planning, and oversight mission of the RTA. In 2017, the proposed administrative budget accounts for 44.3% of agency expenses, or $18.1 million. This amount is 24% below the 2017 administrative cap of $23.8 million allowed by the RTA Act. The proposed regional services budget supports services provided to the public. Regional services include the ADA paratransit certification, mobility management and travel training, the Travel Information Center, the RTA Customer Service Centers, free and reduced fare programs, and the RTA Transit Benefit Program. Regional programs also include the RTA's grant-funded projects and RTA-funded studies and initiatives. The proposed regional programs budget accounts for the remaining 55.7% or $22.8 million of 2017 agency expenses. In 2017, budgeted funding and revenue totaled $40.9 million and is shown on the left. Of that amount, 87.7% or $35.1 million represents regional public funding from the RTA sales tax. The remaining 14.3% or $5.8 million includes federal and state grants and other revenue. Agency expenses also total $40.9 million and are shown on the right. Administrative costs account for 44.3% or $18.1 million. Regional services account for 39.8% or $16.3 million. And grant and RTA funded projects account for the remaining 15.9% or $6.5 million. For many of these projects, the RTA acts as an advocate and granting agency, receiving funds for the region and then administering grants to the service boards, municipalities, and counties for planning projects. This chart depicts the portion of the agency budget supported by regional funding from the RTA sales tax. We also call this the net operating budget because it reflects expenses less associated revenue and outside funding. Here we compare the proposed 2017 administrative and regional programs budgets to the 2016 adopted budget. The 2017 administrative budget increases by 2.1% or $0.4 million. The regional programs budget increases by 16.5% or $2.4 million. This increase reflects successful efforts to obtain grant funding for programs that benefit the residents and transit riders of the region. Thus, the total proposed RTA agency net operating budget of $35.1 million is expected to increase by 8.6% or $2.8 million. Total agency headcount is budgeted to decline from 119 in 2016 to 114 in 2017. The proposed 2017 budget also reflects a merit-based salary increase for RTA staff that averages 3%. The next couple of slides highlight some of the programs and projects included in the proposed 2017 RTA agency budget. In 2017, the RTA will develop the 2018 through 2022 Regional Transit Strategic Plan. We will devise the 10-year capital program vision and funding plan to address long-term capital and operating funding needs. The RTA will issue a $150 million capital bond to help support the Service Board capital programs, and staff will adapt the RTA's role in transit asset management and reporting of asset condition as required by recent federal regulations. Also in 2017, the RTA will issue a call for projects for community planning and Section 5310 programs. We will complete ongoing projects in the Access to Transit Improvement Program. The RTA will seek additional congestion mitigation and air quality, or CMAQ funds, to expand the program to more communities in the region. Staff will develop a new training program to assist our growing population of older adults in learning how to ride fixed route transit as an option to ADA paratransit service. We will also improve access to RTA services at community-based locations. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The budget certainly is a positive budget when you consider you're holding the administrative cost to 2.1%, and our growth areas are the areas we want to see the growth in our programs of direct service to the public. So I think you've got a really a good start on getting the budget to us to where we can hopefully adopt it in the future. Are there
Thank you.
questions or comments? Anybody? Yes, Director
I just
Melvin.
want to say it was a good report and a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No other questions or comments? We'll go on to the last item, which is adjournment. Is there any new business? If not, motion to adjourn. Director Melvin, second by Director Lewis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Ayes have it. Committee adjourned.
Good morning. I'd like to call the Planning and Administrative Committee